Welcome to The Work Within, where we have conversations about mental health and faith to help you live with greater connection and wholeness in your everyday life. The Work Within is a podcast of the Watershed initiative, supporting the mental health needs of the local church. Thanks for listening. Hi, welcome to The Work Within. My name is John Lin, and I'm your host today. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Dieula Previlon, and our special guest, Calvin Burns. This is your first time on the show, Calvin, so we're super excited to have you here, man. Welcome.
Welcome, Calvin.
Just to tell you all a little bit about Calvin, Calvin is an LPC and the director of Lifeologie Austin. He specializes in working with people struggling with eating disorders, in addition to working with people experiencing depression, addictions, and those who struggle with the effects of divorce. He's married to his wife, Anna, who is also a therapist. He was a therapist power couple, and they have one kid and another on the way. So, very cool. Well, today we want to talk about the complex relationship that we have with food and our bodies. And so I wanted to tee us off with this question to both of y'all. So Dieula, Calvin, are you more of a live to eat or eat to live type person?
I would definitely say I'm a eat to live. I enjoy, like, my favorite thing is a Sonic vanilla Dr. Pepper, easy ice, easy vanilla. Like, that is my go-to. And they know me by name at this point at Sonic, so I just pull up and they know what to do. Between that and exercising, be able to enjoy the food that I do, that I'm definitely more on that side.
I mean, I think for me to answer this question is, it depends.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That sounds complicated, Dieula.
It is. I have a complicated relationship with food, okay? Some days, I do enjoy food. I'm a child of a culture where the taste and the spices and all of that, like, we have a vibrant culture when it comes to food. And so we were exposed to spices and just robust taste in our culture. And so
You're making me hungry.
And what was that?
I said, you're making me hungry.
Yes. And then when we moved to the US, we had to kind of be reintroduced to new tastes and new flavors from all different cultures. And so for me, I just get so excited to try different things and to be exposed to different things and all of that. So I feel like there are times there's food all around my life. So I feel like at times it is a live to eat. But then there are times I'm like, okay, you can't live like this, you can't live like this. You have to eat in order to live. It's not about, just indulging in all the things, just because you can. So it has to be an eat to live. And I'll talk a little bit about just fasting, which is something that, we do a lot of in the Black church community. And so, fasting helps me move into a eat to live space rather than live to eat.
Oh, that's good. I can't wait to hear that because, I mean, this sounds sacrilegious, but I hate fasting because I'm someone, I live to eat. I love to eat. And I know there's some stuff that God is working on in my life there. All right, second question. Are you more of a hit the gym or hit the sack type of person?
I would say I'm definitely more a hit the gym. That's something that, to your own point, John, like, that's something God's working on in my life to continue a healthy relationship there. But that's definitely something that helps me, like, start my day, feel just more present in my body. And it's time, like, to just get ready for the day. I usually do it in the morning. If I'm going to do it, I do it in the morning. And so that just helps me get out of that, like, sleep into, like, okay, it's time to move forward and get into the day.
Yeah. I have stories for everything.
All right, John, I'm going to challenge you. Keep this one simple, all right?
No, this is simple. No, I love the gym. I love working out. And I think one of the things that drew me to really appreciating working on my body is when I went through a season of grief. And I realized how necessary doing something physical with my body was because it really has been a saving grace for me in helping me manage anxiety and loss and depression and all of that. And I tell people, if I don't get my workout in the morning, at least, walking or weightlifting or doing something in the morning, I would not be able to do the things that I'm doing. So I have a really great relationship with working out because it just helps me mentally, spiritually, and the physical part of it. But I feel like I get more benefits out of it with my spiritual and emotional health than maybe some physical too. But yeah.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because I mean, that is something we want to talk more about in our conversation today. That things like the food we eat, exercise, are deeply spiritual. They have a deep spiritual connection, and so I thank you for bringing that up. For me, I love to eat and I love to hit the sacks. Getting to the gym is a real struggle. This year, I'm trying to just hit the gym once a week, and then other times do things at home, walk around the neighborhood, push-ups, squats, just in my living room. And my dog, Nori, just looks at me like I'm doing weird things.
I love it.
But,
The world.
yes, but it is so critical. Yes, it is so critical. So that's what we want to talk about today. In our food and body-obsessed world, what are some signs that things are heading in the wrong direction? What are some things we could look out for? And in a positive way, what does it look like to move towards a healthier relationship to food and our bodies? Before we jump into that, 2 quick invitations. If this podcast has been helpful to you, would you leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe? That really does help us a lot. And then secondly, if you'd like to find a therapist, we would love the privilege of being able to walk with you for a season. Reach out to us and we can help you find someone who's a good fit. And new clients can receive a discount. You can find out more about that in the show notes. All right. So as we have this conversation, I want to frame it by starting with an observation I have about how people generally, the posture that we generally have towards food and our bodies. And what I notice are 2 extremes, and you may find yourself somewhere in between, or maybe even going back and forth. And so at one extreme is what I would call the minimization camp. That's where we minimize the importance of what we eat and how we treat our bodies on our overall well-being and our spiritual lives, on our spiritual health. And so that's maybe it's very low on the priority list. We don't invest much time or energy into that. We just eat whatever, and maybe we rarely exercise, but it's not top of mind. It's not on our radar much at all because we don't think of it as an important thing. And so I see people have that perspective. I have that perspective sometimes. That's one extreme. At the other extreme is what I would say is the obsession camp. So there's the minimization camp and there's the obsession camp. And this is where food and body image are a constant preoccupation. And so if you find yourself in this camp or in there for a season, you find that a disproportionate amount of your time, your mental load is given to what am I going to eat? What am I not going to eat? Going to the gym, hitting the gym, or hyper focusing on parts of your body that you don't like and you're trying to fix and that you wish were different. And so I think that's another extreme that we can have. And like I said, we may lean towards one or the other, or we may go back and forth. But I just wanted to ask the 2 of y'all, what do you tend to see as clinicians and even just in your daily life? What do you tend to see people gravitating towards?
What I tend to see is people being disconnected from their bodies, right? Um, Oftentimes, when there's stress, when there's overwhelm, when there's anxiety or even trauma, one of the first things that happens is that there's a disconnection from the self. And so the disconnection lends itself to even to the place of food or the relationship we have with food, or working out. Either, they downplay the impact of food in their bodies or obsess about it. And I think it all stems from the same issue. We don't have a connection with our bodies. There's like a part of us we don't know. We don't investigate. And we're so used to that disconnection that we don't know how to bring back the connection to the point where we're noticing things, right? We're so disconnected that we don't know how we feel. We don't know, what works for us. We don't know what food tastes good. We don't know. We're just completely either evading or fully obsessing over. And I think it stems from the disconnection that we have from our bodies.
Absolutely. Like that, as you mentioned, like the trauma, like when we experience those things, there's that lack of control. And that's just one form it can show up, or one way it can show up. And when we find things that we can control, whether it's food, exercise, and it's like that gives us that security, that safety that our body is actually seeking, but we find it in something else. And
Right.
you said it so well that then becomes the pursuit, the behavior, the belief is that like unless I have these things or I don't have these things, one, I'm not safe, two, I'm not desirable, or three, I'm not going to be okay.
Right.
And that we lose ourselves in the pursuit of finding that comfort or that security in something else.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is we're disconnected. We don't understand what we actually need, what actually nourishes us. And then what we do, Calvin, you were mentioning, is we use food, we use exercise as a form of control, not because we're responding to what we need, but because we're looking to feel safe. And so we're coping in a way that can end up becoming unhealthy. Is that a little bit of what you're saying?
Absolutely. And that
Yeah.
can be in just a single moment, or it can be an ongoing behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I would imagine a lot of people who are listening would find themselves where it's like we know that we probably should eat healthier. We know that drinking soda all the time is not a healthy thing, and yet we reach for the big gulp. We know it would be good to take walks, and yet it's just more pleasurable to scroll on your phone when you're tired at night. And so we know these things, but we may lack the motivation to make the changes towards a healthier relationship with food and body. Can you all speak to how, and you began to allude to this, Drilla, when you talked about exercising grief and how you learned that, but how important in your eyes as clinicians is food and our bodies to our overall mental, emotional, relational well-being? Like, is that something you guys recommend to your clients? Like, hey, you need to eat healthier. You guys need to actually, I mean, how does that fit in to the overall landscape?
And that's a challenging topic because so often when we think of eat healthier, I think of like the Instagram reel of like, get ready with me, or what did I eat today? And it can become this really restricted thing of like, it needs to be under this certain amount. It needs to be this specific food group, or you need to exclude this certain type of food, chemical, like you name it. It becomes very restricted and controlled. And that, as we were talking about a second ago, that takes us away from being able to actually listen to our body and allow it to not only enjoy something, but then also give it something that it needs. And it
Right.
becomes the fixation on something, again, outside of us, instead of allowing ourselves to be present and be like, okay, I'm in the mood for a big gulp today. You know what? Let's do it. That's fine. And I need to be aware and keep in balance. Like, okay, I've had this. It's not something I need every day, but there's nothing wrong with having it and enjoying that and letting that be a part of my life that I enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the recommendation that I always start with is paying attention. One of the homeworks I give some of my clients is for them to keep a log of what their bodies are needing, what they're noticing, about themselves, what they're noticing. When are they tired? When do they get overwhelmed? When they get anxious? What are the circumstances that are creating those things? And what do they do with that? So that's the first step, is really to pay attention, to know when you're thirsty, to know when you're hungry, and to know what you're craving for and what's behind the craving. Because if you go into making recommendations about food, then you miss the reason behind what's causing either the overeating or undereating, right? The suppressions, what's causing, the diet culture. So it's important to start with just noticing, just paying attention. And then that leads to conversations about what's under that, what do you think you are needing, in those moments when there's overwhelmed or when you're anxious, what sort of comfort are you looking for? So it has to start with that relationship first with self, because without the relationship with self first, then it becomes a relationship with me, and I'm not with you all the time. So, you need to figure that relationship out, and the relationship with self has to be the one that is nurtured first before you can even talk about the relationship you have with food, right?
And I love that because it's something that so often I'll hear people say like, oh, well, if I just listen to myself, then I'm just going to keep eating and I'm not going to be able to stop, or I just won't be able to not do blank. And you said it so well. It's like, well, yes, you're listening to yourself to better understand, not to just indulge, not to just go for it all the time. But then you ask the next question of like, okay, what is it I'm needing? And then why do I need this? And
Right.
that's where you find the change. That's where you find this more balanced view of health is like, okay, what is healthy for you? And how do we
Right.
pursue that? How do we accomplish that?
Mm. That's really good, y'all, because what I hear y'all saying is it's not just about responding to the initial impulse. Like I feel like I want a big gulp, but starting to pay attention. Well, is there any pattern? Is there anything that's driving that that impulse?
Yeah.
And you start to notice, oh wow, I always feel like I have a need for a big gulp every time I come back from work. And what's behind that? Is it just because I'm just tired, or is it because there's a coworker that just grates on my nerves, and I feel really frustrated, and this is how I deal with frustration. I get my sugar kick, my sugar rush. Yeah, so I have to admit, Kelvin, because I used to be very addicted to Coke and soda. I always had to order a Coke and soda when I ate out. Finally kicked the habit. So I would acknowledge that I have a very hard boundary against soda, because I
Sure.
see like how it affects me and sugar. And so I was surprised when you're like, hey, every now and then get the big gulp, just not every day. Like, oh, every other day, would that be all right? I'm like,
Like
no
what?
way. Yeah. I mean, so Calvin, just drill in a little bit more there. So what would cause you to, at a practical level, or yeah, as you're talking to someone who's like, yeah, I'm reaching for that big gulp a lot, like what would be some of the questions that you would ask to help them begin to see, like, is there anything underneath that, or is that just I like big gulps, that's it, and that's period, there's not nothing more to it.
Right. Because it sounds so innocent. Like it's a soda. Like, no, Calvin, you're overthinking it. Like it's really not that big of a deal. It's like, okay, maybe. And when we go from I would like this, oh man, that sounds really enjoyable, to I need this, oh man, I begin to worry, like, how am I going to feel if I don't have it? Am I going to be okay? Oh, I know I'm going to need it or I want it later, so I might as well get it now. When it becomes more like a focus and or potential fixation, that's when I begin to really drill in or challenge the desire for something versus just like it being a more natural, healthy desire. Like, hey, this sounds good to me. When it becomes more of a consistent pattern or I'm not going to be okay without it, there's a difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder. A person can experience disordered eating where they have a moment where they had a bad day at work. You know what? I'm going to treat myself here. Like, that sounds great. Okay. That doesn't have to be this big deal. Like, great, go for it. Hey, you do you. And then to your point, if it's every day or most days when I have this coworker I interact with or a stressful meeting, I need this drink to be able to come down. It's like, ooh, that's when that shift happens. And we got to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. 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 I think one of the things that's been happening with me, as I shared earlier, in the past few years, or even in the Black church, and I use the Black church because, I worked in many other churches, white churches, where we don't fast, but in the Black church, there's a tradition of fasting. Um, and fasting not for dietary purposes, but more for a spiritual discipline, where we learn of that spiritual discipline of Jesus fasting 40 days and 40 nights and so on and so forth. Not necessarily for the food component of it, but to reveal something, right? And so the first step of fasting is really the first phase of fasting is usually the hardest because you're removing things that are usually your comfort, like coffee, sugar, and some people do the Daniel fast and where you're removing meat products, right? So you're removing all the things that make food taste good, everything,
Great. Yeah.
you know? And so for me, what it always does is that it reveals what I usually gravitate towards for comfort. And that creates the noise for me and makes it hard for me to listen to God and for me to even listen to myself and what exactly is going on with me. And so the first time I really focused on fasting as an adult was probably a couple years ago. And my mind was blown as to what I saw about my behaviors, around food, around coffee, around sugars, around, just me eating what I want because I can, because I have the privilege to do that. So I'm going to do what I want to do. And so it really challenged my relationship with not only with myself, but with food and just things I would gravitate towards for comfort. And it's not even just food that we see these behaviors. We see them in a plethora of different
Yeah.
places. It just so
Absolutely.
happens that we're talking about food today.
Right.
But yeah, it's very revealing when you try to discipline yourself to refrain from certain things. So,
My goodness.
John, are we being
I'm feeling
convicted here?
so convicted right now because I am a two-a-dayer. I have my coffee in the morning. Like that's the first thing I do.
Yep.
And then I have it a few hours later. And I am so rigid about it. Like
Sure.
everything else revolves
Sure.
around the coffee fix. And
Yeah,
I know there's probably, I'm not going to say it here because then I'll be held
yeah. Well,
accountability.
the thing is for me, John, is that I wasn't even a two-a-dayer. There's dopamine that I believe is released just by the smell of coffee for me.
Yeah.
I was just a one-cup person, and I'm like, I mean, I don't even care for that thing that much, Like, coffee is not even the thing that I would love to, like, indulge in that much. But missing the smell, missing that first taste of the coffee is just like, oh my goodness. There's something here
Yeah.
that I haven't been paying attention to that because I'm fasting, now I'm paying attention the more
Yes.
of this thing that's occupied so much time
Yeah.
and space in my life.
Yeah. So let's draw out that distinction because correct me if I'm wrong. What I hear y'all saying is whether it's food, chips, a big gulp, exercise, there are things that can bring us comfort and soothing in a healthy way. Like we've had a bad day. It's okay to get some cookies. It's okay to,
Right.
watch some show that just helps you unplug. But where it goes from comfort to crutch, maybe that's the distinction where it becomes a crutch where like, I need this and I can't, my mind's fixated until I get that thing. That's when some warning signals need to go up and we can start to get curious about what is that, what is underneath that, and what is that thing serving. And so, Calvin, I wanted to ask you, like, you brought up the distinction between disordered eating and eating disorder. Is it that eating disorder is just a more extreme version of disordered eating? Like, is the underlying mechanism the same and just more pronounced, or is it a different underlying mechanism? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, and this is not like diagnostic, but it's more the consistency in the relationship that someone with disordered eating, it can be like stress eating. If that's a consistent thing, when I feel stressed, I go to this thing, and then I'm like, oh, that's it. One of the only ways I can be okay. I could do something else, but this is what I'm going to do. Eating disorder, maybe this is a better way to put it, that becomes more of an identity. Like, this is who I am. Like, this is unless for someone who struggles with anorexia, unless I am this weight, this physique, these things, like, I'm not okay. I'm not desirable. I'm not safe. Like, it's just not going to be okay. And so the consistency is more present, and the identity aligns with the relationship with food instead of the relationship with themselves or the exercise, you name it. That's when it becomes more eating disorder, and it's the fixation.
Okay. I'll follow that up with, like, what about, like, working out? Like, is working out, let's say you're spending hours at the gym or compulsively working out. Is that a similar thing where it becomes, I guess what I hear you saying is when it becomes part of your identity, like, I am this person, I'm striving to be this, to have this look, and that defines me. That's when it becomes, I don't know what you would call that. It's not an eating disorder, but
there's terms like orthorexia, or this is not in the DSM, but the term for men more specifically is sounds silly, but bigorexia, literally BIGO-rexia, to where the fixation is on being bigger, more muscular, and that being a way to feel like you're worth something, that you're desirable. Again, more into that identity and self-esteem, what it says about me, instead of something I'm doing to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Hey, if you enjoy feeling strong, that's great.
Yeah.
You enjoy, like we were talking about earlier, going to the gym to really set my mind for the day, to get that stress out, to wake up. That's awesome. And then when it steers more towards like, oh man, I'm going to have a terrible day unless I do this, or like, ooh, I feel like just because you didn't work out that morning or do exactly 100 crunches, I feel like my stomach's changing. Like, oh, I feel looser. It's like, ooh, our bodies don't change that fast. And that's where it's more on that eating disorder side.
Okay. It's confusing. I think it's very, very confusing, especially for young people these days, because the trend is like, let's focus more on health, and that's a great thing. And
Absolutely.
but you can mask it. You can mask something deeper. And so that's something I talk to my sons a lot of. Well, I have a high schooler who, a lot of his friends, and he's interested in, being healthy and hitting the gym. But I'm like, always like, you be very careful about the motivation, right? Why you're doing that. So bigorexia. That's getting big. Obsession with big. Is that did I say it right? Okay.
Yeah, bigorexia. It sounds silly, but for whatever reason,
it's a real thing.
It's like they were looking into a lab of men working out, and they're like, look at those big old guys. Bigorexia. Like, it just clicked. Like, what? I don't get it.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. I think the both of y'all have alluded to trauma and the impact of trauma on our body image and relationship to food. Dieula, I know you specialize in working with many clients who have faced trauma. How does trauma affect, can you say more about how does trauma affect our relationship with food and body image?
Yeah, trauma is the event that happened to you, but it continues to happen in your mind, your body. It persists. The feelings persist. The response to the thing that happens to you persists. And I believe what it does is that we're constantly trying to heal. So addiction is either the avoidance, addiction of food or whatnot, is the avoidance of feeling that feeling, or it's us trying to heal ourselves, right? It's us trying to find that thing to comfort, to make the pain go away, trying to find things to cause us to feel good, to either evade or feel good or just not deal all together. And so I see this in just many areas of life. And like I said earlier, not just food, but in many areas we see this over fixation on this thing that's going to help us not feel as horrible about the thing that happened to us. I think it's Gabor Mate that says,
Yeah.
he talks about addiction, that it's not a medical issue as much as it is a trauma issue. He always brings it back to the trauma. When you're trying to deal with addiction, and you're just working with the symptoms and not really going back to the childhood or the thing that happened to you in your childhood, you're just putting a band-aid on a big wound, because I can tell you to watch your eating, or, create a food log and do all of the things, but unless we talk about the why, the what happened, what's caused the need for you being fixated on food or working out, then it's just a quick fix. It's not really addressing the real issue. So part of being in therapy is really learning to address the real issue, the real thing that happened. And over time, and trauma work is slow work, right? It's not work that you do overnight. It's slow work that happens a little bit at a time. And I think a lot of people give up easily when there's addiction involved, because you're so fixated. You want that quick fix, right? You want that coffee, you want that sugar, and whatnot. And the work that we do is slow. It's slow in a sense of really doing the process work of the trauma, and then we start working on some of the behaviors that reinforces it. And then the other thing that I'll share is that we live in a culture that really reinforces, these behaviors. And so we're dealing with like two big things here. Not only the trauma of the thing that happened, but you have a culture that reinforces these behaviors that cause you to numb out, that cause you to evade, that cause you to have the comfort that you need. So it's a lot. It can be a lot
Yeah.
if you don't get professional help.
Yeah.
I love how you put it, that like the struggle. Maybe not your exact word, but like that struggle of like dealing with this, not wanting to deal with it. And so often it's like I'll hear people say like, well, this shouldn't be a problem. Like I shouldn't be
Right.
struggling with this. Like it's not that big of a deal. It's not that deep. Struggling doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that you've learned to adapt to something in your life with this thing, behavior, belief, person, you name it, fill in the blank. And often I'll have clients that are like, well, I wasn't abused, I wasn't sexually abused, I wasn't beaten, all these things. Like, why? That doesn't make sense. And then I want to make a quick distinction between big T trauma and little T trauma. Big T trauma is what we think about with war, divorce, sexual assault, like these big things like, oof, man, that was traumatic. Little T trauma, how I explain it, is like if you were to hollow out and open up the big T and start making small deposits. You look on Instagram and you see this fitness influencer, what they're eating, what they're doing, exercise. And instead of saying like, hey, good for them, that's great. We go through our head, and I know I've said it like, oh man, I need to do that more. Oh man, I wish I looked like that. Or we have a friend point out, like giving us a hard time, and they point out an insecurity that we have, and that sticks with us. These little T's over time to build up like in a piggy bank with our coins, and they can have a similar, if not same impact as a big T trauma over time. And that's where a lot of the work comes from, is like, what are these narratives, as you were just speaking about, with our culture, our families, and what are these, again, narratives that we're being taught, being told, being instructed on, that I need to be different. I need to be healthier. I need to be stronger. I need to fill in the blank, whatever it is, that it becomes very difficult to feel safe with ourselves and who we are and the body we have, unless I am strong, unless I am this number weight, unless my body looks like blank. Um, and that's often how trauma influences the relationship we have with food or our bodies. It's like, I cannot be safe unless I am this.
Yeah.
Or I do this.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure we talk about a biblical perspective on this, how Scripture informs our understanding of how we eat and the bodies that we have. And thank you both of you for talking about the underlying things that keep us from often living the way that Scripture envisions for us. And still, let's look at this and see how our conversation informs what we understand Scripture says. So, for example, 1 Corinthians 6:19 says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own." And when I read that verse, what I take away from that is, man, what I do with my body matters. What I watch, what I eat, how I treat it matters, because my body is a tent. It is a tent, albeit a temporary one, but a tent for the living God. And that's an amazing privilege, amazing reality. And it means that I really want to steward that body better, or in a way that honors God, because we are embodied beings. And it reminded me of an experience I had with one of my friends in 6th grade. I went to his house, and while we were hanging out there, in the middle of just hanging out, he I'm not going to do it now, but he snorted and then hawked a giant loogie onto his living room floor. He literally just spit onto his living room floor. And I remember just being shocked. Like, I'd never seen someone treat their own home like that. And it was, it was a nice home. It was a modest home, but it was nice. And that's really gross and is very vivid, but I do think there are ways in which we can dishonor our bodies in that way. Like, who would do that to your own home? So I think that's something, that this scripture calls to mind. How do we regard the space that our souls and the Spirit of God inhabits? And then several chapters later in 1 Corinthians 10, Paul writes, "So whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God." Paul is providing instructions for the Christians who were wrestling with questions of conscience, right, when it came to the food they ate. And they were wondering, is it okay for us to eat this food? Because the dietary laws that they had inherited from the Old Testament prohibited that. And his governing principle was, what ultimately matters is, are you doing this to glorify God? Does this glorify God? And so with our bodies, we can seek to be good stewards with what we have, accepting the bodies that we have, treating them kindly, taking good care of them with sleep, exercise, being mindful of what we put into it. These scriptures, I think, help us to see that even with things like food, let's not use it as a form of coping or escaping, but trying to eat mindfully with thanksgiving, to share food with others in the company of friends, and to be generous with our food, to see that as a gift from God. Anything y'all would like to add from a biblical perspective or a theological perspective when you think about food and our bodies?
I think these types of conversations, give us language and even give us some pathways to do some good body theology, where we're talking about paying attention, we're talking about presence, we're talking about relationship with self, as we have a relationship with God. That's body theology we're doing, because it's spiritual work, because when we start paying attention to ourselves and paying attention to our bodies, that's spiritual work, because the work I'm doing with fasting and paying attention and learning about my body and learning what food agrees with my body, what doesn't agree with my body, that's spiritual work for me, because it allows me to really appreciate the God that created my body, in such a way. So I think these types of conversations really help us learn to have a different theology of the body, so that and the body is not just here for us to conquer, but really to have a vessel where we can have relationship with God and each other.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
it
It's a
is beautiful.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, commune with the spirit or or other people. And I think something, when you were talking about that, something I feel like people often underestimate or underpower, or however you want to say it, is the Holy Spirit. like that God is with us, that he's in us. We're not alone. If that's something I want, if someone's going to hear anything today, I want them to hear like, you're not alone. Not only with professionals that can be supportive to you or can help you navigate these things, but that you have the Holy Spirit with you. You have people in your life. Like something I've been asking my clients to do recently when they're in that moment of disconnection or in the moment of uncertainty and that anxiety rises, whatever it may be, is to ask themselves and to take a moment and say, I want to hear my Father's voice. There's all these thoughts, these fears, these insecurities that are going through my head, driving these different thoughts and beliefs and behaviors. But what does my Father say? What is God saying to me? And I want to align with that. And that is so hard to do like that. And it can be around the simplest things, but that's how we not only begin to acknowledge the dependence we've developed on something, as we were talking about earlier, but that's how we begin to separate and find the identity that God has for us in his spirit, in his word, in ourselves, instead of in the world that's around us that's broken and is not our home.
Yeah. We have a few more minutes left. And so is there anything else you guys would like to say to those who are tuning in, who are listening, and they're like, yeah, I do want to move towards a healthier relationship with food and with my bodies. Is there any closing word you'd like to say, closing encouragement you'd like to give?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it like 1,000 times on this podcast. Start by paying attention. You know, you can't go wrong by showing up for yourself, by paying attention, by noticing your whys, noticing what agrees with you, noticing what makes you feel good about yourself. No, and not just the body image stuff, but just what makes you feel good internally and spiritually. And that starts with paying attention and being present and showing up for yourself.
She stole mine. I'm just kidding. No, the other thing that came to mind was to ask somebody, like, hey, do you think about this? Is this how you interact with food? Because we become so accustomed to how we think, and we can, good night, after an amount of time, we can justify anything to ourselves. If we tell ourselves enough, or we're isolated to how we think in and of ourselves. And so if it's one person or a few people that you trust, you're close to, or if you want to reach out to a professional, whatever it may be, say, hey, when you are having a hard day, how do you deal with that? They may have a similar approach, and that's fine. Then ask somebody else, like, well, this is how I deal with it. And I've noticed, as you're just saying, I've noticed that I do it consistently. Is that normal? Is that a thing? Is that okay? I'm just trying to figure it out and get more feedback on the way I view things. And that helps us, again, open up that closed door that we often have of how we live our life and what is and is not okay. So we begin to navigate and explore what's there versus.
Yeah. That sounds like getting curious. I mean, we say that a ton of times on this podcast as well. We got to get curious. We got to pay attention. Yeah. As we wrap up this conversation, thank you, both of you. I think it's been rich and has piqued a lot of curiosity in my own mind about food and our bodies. And as we leave, I do really want to impress upon those who are tuning in, like, what an amazing thing that we have this one life, that God gives us these bodies, these vessels, these tents, this temple, and let's try our best. Let's try our darndest to honor God with what we eat, with the way we treat our bodies, realizing that it matters. It really has a huge impact. And so as I'm thinking about some of the things you mentioned, paying attention, realizing that a lot of our disordered eating comes out of disconnection and big trauma and little trauma. And so before we try to fix everything, taking a moment to reflect on what's the why, what's driving this is critical. Really talked about paying attention and keeping a food log just to increase awareness. And I think that's huge because I know I mindlessly eat. And so being able to see that helps reveal patterns. We talked about fasting. And so I imagine for a lot of people, that is a new practice. That would be a new spiritual practice. And then I would say to leaders and parents and anyone who has a position of influence, we must teach about a body theology. We have to teach people to think differently about our bodies and not to be on one extreme or the other. So we would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, how you interact with your body and food, we would love to hear from you. And if you find that your struggle with food or body is affecting your daily life, know that you're not alone, and please reach out. We would love to be able to help be a resource. And so, as always, we want to close with this blessing on you. May the Lord go with you and strengthen you and bless you as you do the work. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to The Work Within. We hope this show blessed you in some way. Please subscribe and leave us a review. Your support means a lot to us. Finally, if you're looking for a therapist, we'd love to help. Visit us at www.watershedinitiative.com to get started. For a limited time, new clients can receive 10% off their first 5 sessions of therapy by mentioning The Work Within. Join us again next time.